Joey Rockenstein and Scott Goldman, you just sold 5460 White Oak Avenue. What are you gonna do now?
Go fuck yourself. Yeah. It's the Bitter Realtor Podcast. We're talking about all things Los Angeles real estate. If it's got four walls and a roof, we're talking about it bitterly. Welcome back to the show. It's Bitter Realtor, and boy, oh boy, wow. What a way to open up the show. Man, we are torn apart with our latest transaction that we closed, which we will get into more detail later. But, Scott, what are we bitter about this week?
Well, the bitterness is sort of, they're bitter tears, Joey. They're tears of joy and bitterness. There's a mix of just salty tears and joy because we finally did it. We finally sold that condominium in what we refer to as Afghanistan.
Completely. I mean, that if there was definitely a Middle East of condominium complexes, 5460 White Oak Avenue would be that place.
It's where many real estate careers have gone and died.
It's a potpourri of real estate careers that have just decimated and been completely run into the ground.
Potpourri. It's a veritable cornucopia.
But I guess the long and the short of it is that we sold the units.
Yes.
Normally,
seller is happy.
Seller is happy. Normally things don't take 10 months to sell,
no.
Allegedly. But it finally got sold. And so I think it would be advantageous of us, if I could use a big word.
Fortuitous.
An even bigger word, thank you.
Yes, sir.
To kind of go through the process of what that took to sell that condo, and also to kind of like maybe do a little comparison of the state of the condo market over this past year of 2024.
A great conversation. So first of all, one thing we saw with this particular subject property was it was a long sales cycle for us. I think
that's what she said.
So long, in fact, that I think that the NAR settlement still hadn't been figured out when we started representing this seller.
I mean, great point. The settlement kind of had a bit of a back and forth during our entire listing.
Right, because when we first listed it, there was such a thing as a broker commission. So that there was a BAC in the MLS for that. That went away sort of mid-transaction, but they figured anybody who had already had it in there would just leave it in there. We, as Coldwell Banker Realtors, had probably, I'm going to be a stack of forms change on us.
No exaggeration there.
During the course of this sales cycle. How many people do you think we got in there? How many viewings? I mean, we could pull up the super, right? But
absolutely. I mean,
hundreds.
I
mean, yeah. I'm going to be shy and say 135, 140 viewings. I mean,
everybody knew about the listing, and there were several listings going on in that building. So I feel like we weren't the only ones that were suffering for this entire time.
No, and there were some challenges, right? Which you can break down a little bit better than I, but we do know that there was an HOA challenge.
Absolutely. So I think let's start with how condos in general are a different beast to sell. And I would say from my experience with other clients this year, just running into problems with insurance issues with condominium complexes, because the insurability has been extremely hard.
And while in California alone, many insurance carriers have left the state, let's just say.
Right.
Yep.
And also the HOAs are just not properly run. So a lot of the places I ran into, not just with White Oak, but other places were low on their HOA reserves.
Right, which means they can't do certain things that they have to do, like maintenance. And it gets pushed along and pushed along and pushed along. So I think when you decide to buy a condo, you know you're at the mercy of the HOA.
And so that really throws a wrench into the kitchen for people who maybe just want to put down 5% to get into a first-time home for them. Mm-hmm. And if they're coming in with 5%, well, then the lender is going to have to do a major deep dive into how well the HOA is run.
You know, and some HOAs have pending litigation, Liz Pendas, and I don't know, sorry, not a dental hygienist. It's funny, right? I don't know why, but it is. But when there's pending litigation, as there is in this particular HOA of 5460 White Oak, it causes an issue for people who are trying to sell.
So just with those like aspects with condos in general, now we get into 5460 White Oak, which has all of those things and more.
Well, like 7 pending.
7
Liz Pendas.
7 pending lawsuits for an HOA.
Unimaginable.
I mean, already a major red flag, and not just one.
Yeah.
Also, they are running into major issues with deferred maintenance through the decades, I would say.
Which was causing a problem on many of the units' balconies. They were unsafe to traverse. Luckily, our unit was not.
It was not red tagged.
But it looked upon many red tagged balconies.
I mean, I'm not going to, let's just not lie. That balcony, even though it was not red tag, it still looked like crap.
Well, and every time somebody wanted to go out on it, I held my breath. Sure. Let me unlatch this really radical lock up here. Do I have a picture of it? I'm going to see if I have a picture of it, I'll put it here. If I don't, it literally looked like a bolt. I mean, it was like
it was hardcore.
And it looked like the HOA might have had the key.
Yeah, it looked pretty hardcore. Like,
yeah,
definitely nobody was getting into that sliding door. But especially if they came up the balcony, because if they tried to come up the balcony, well, then the balcony would have collapsed.
Well, let's not boil the ocean. I don't know that our balcony would have collapsed, right. But I did say to one...
It would have at least splintered. I mean, come on.
Can we go out on the balcony, Scott? Well, maybe one at a time.
I'm like, what? I would just say, it's a balcony. They're all the same. Look at all those balconies out there. Well, actually, don't look out there. It's all look out there.
Well, I think that was also part of the problem is there was some adverse conditions for us, literally right in the view, right across the way from us. That put some people off. But I do think we priced it fair.
So people would look on Redfin or Zillow, and they would see like a condo that was priced anywhere from like $250,000 to $350,000 in Encino, mind you, and be like, "Oh my God, how is this even possible?"
Well, that's how. And just to back up a little bit, Joey's describing how most people go on these buy sites and they have a slider tool, and it says, "Show me everything in this city from this price to this price, or under this price, or how many rooms, or how many square feet." It can do a whole bunch of different filters and. I guess our condo came up a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, 2-bath condo, just under 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, 990 square feet. And I do think the complex is beautiful. It's got some fantastic amenities. Really, really nice, which we highlighted in our reel. But, wow, you're still at the mercy of the HOA.
Well, because that's the thing that they don't see right away is that the HOA is $1,040.
Which we were very upfront about.
Totally transparent.
Very transparent in all of our listings, and we were the first people to disclose it to any buyers.
But it just begged the question of, so it was $1,040-ish. That 112 of that was a plumbing assessment that was going to fall off in 2027. So that left with a regular HOA of $934. So Scott, my question to you is, what is an HOA doing with $500,000 every month that they're getting?
Well, Joey, as I like to say on the show a lot, there's only one group of people making a lot of money in deals like this, and that's the lawyers.
I think that's been the case for this entire past year.
Why does lawyers sound so much like the word bitter?
I mean, I'm bitter about some lawyers in particular.
Lawyers.
I mean, I can think of the lawyers
who represented... Will you punch the lawyer for me, please?
Burnett and Spitzer, whatever the guy's name is.
Who?
Sitzer, Burnett. Who are the lawyers that represented those two douchebags?
Where? Over at the...
On the NAR side.
Oh, those are a couple of douchebags who only made about $60 million each.
Right, and who were complaining about us charging 6%.
And I think they got 40.
At least.
Don't get me started.
Right, that'll be another episode.
Yeah, please. So,
but how do they run into this kind of like deferred maintenance?
Okay, well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, in condo complexes as large as this, there's a lot of maintenance needs to take place. But if the money is being drained by certain unscrupulous characters who sit on the board of the HOA, well, then you got a problem.
Got it.
You got a problem. So I don't know enough of the details, but I do know that certain people were skimming, taking money. And that person, I don't know what the fate of that person is, but I do know that the HOA is now recovered. They have a number of owners who live in the complex who have a who have more skin in the game, I would say.
Right. They, from what I understand, they have better people on the board at that HOA and better people who are working for the management company.
So, in terms of our deal, let's back up a little bit. Somebody's searching the Zillow or the Redfin or whatever, and they put in what they want, and they stumble across a condo listed for $274,000 in the heart of Encino, which is unheard of. They dig a little deeper. I don't know if the Zillow or the Redfin ad exposed the private remarks about $1,000 plus HOA, but there were certainly some hurdles for us to clear.
Absolutely.
Least of which was the very sweet buyer's agent, who's a very sweet man, but it brings us to a sort of a topic that Joey and
oh boy. Yeah. And we're going to get to that.
Okay.
I want to make sure that we flush out everything about this evil condo complex first. Okay. So everybody can get a clear picture of what to do if they ever happen to run into a client saying 5460 White Oak Avenue, because I think we're telling people that you shouldn't sign up for that.
So there we go. Now you got sync.
We're synced.
We're synced.
Okay,
good.
So now to the nuts and bolts of how we finally got this great condo sold. And I think it's important to, when it comes down to it, I really want to stress that everybody should use a transaction coordinator.
You must.
It is so important. Now, don't get me wrong, when I was mentored in this business, when I first got in 2017, my mentor didn't let me use a transaction coordinator for my first 3 deals because she wanted me to know all of the forms, disclosures, and contracts by heart, backwards and forwards. That's great. But then when I came across a guy named Bill Taylor, he insisted that I use a transaction coordinator.
My mentor.
And that was probably the best move ever because it frees you up to do other things like prospect and get clients and to not have to deal with all the the bolts, nuts and bolts. What am I saying here?
Well, so here's the thing about Bill that's so funny is the first day I met Bill, he's like, you need nicer clothes and use a transaction coordinator. That pretty much set the stage.
Right.
And I think we were talking about how he would really get on us if our contracts were wrong or we missed a checkbox, and he'd get out a big yellow highlighter pen and everything was yellow and orange on
Pump
you.
your brakes.
Come on, this is terrible. You want to get paid?
So I guess the question is, what is a transaction coordinator?
So a transaction coordinator is somebody who looks after the entire packet of paperwork and makes sure that everything is signed. Everything is signed, DocuSigned usually now, that the seller's got everything signed, and the seller has a lot of paperwork to fill out, right?
Tons. Right.
From disclosures to banking information to tax information to release of forms, in our case, the HOA.
Right.
The buyer has a ton of forms to fill out, and usually the buyer side has a transaction coordinator who is not the agent.
So there's 2 TCs in a transaction.
The seller's TC, our girl Lauren, who's just
was great.
Oof, the best. And the other side's TC, which was the buyer's agent.
So right away we're kind of tipped off that perhaps this buyer's agent, who was great, by the way, we're not disparaging him in any way,
guy.
all right? But he missed a checkbox, which could happen, but...
Not if Bill Taylor was your mentor.
But the box that you check to confirm the agency relationship of whom is representing whom.
Who is the buyer's agent? And he didn't check that box.
Who's the buyer? Who's he representing?
And what's the brokerage? And we corrected that on our
SCO.
Our seller counteroffer, saying that the price would be this because he came in very low. We said this is what the price would be, and now getting into inspections.
Even though I told him what the price
was
going to be.
But we said write an offer,
right.
So we got to give him that.
Okay.
And then we had inspections rather quickly, within a day, I think.
Super quick escrow, by the way.
Super quick, like less than 14 days.
That was my fastest that I've had.
Done one quicker, just one by a day. Just one.
It really keeps you on your toes when you have that.
There's a lot of moving parts, and that's why a transaction coordinator is such a godsend.
Completely.
People say, isn't escrow going to handle it? Escrow's going to handle what escrow handles. They don't handle the transaction. They're just a go-between. They make sure that everybody gets what's coming to them from one side or the other. Right. That's all. So, in terms of our deal, after inspection, they came back. They had a rather lengthy list and a very large request.
They basically came at us with the inspection report and said, we would like you to take care of everything listed in this report.
And the buyer's agent put down a request of $15,000, but he was very nice because he said he could request $15,000 based on the itemized estimate that his
that was nice of him, wasn't
the buyer who's also a contractor. Yeah, everything was like,
let's see.
this
is a good price.
Yeah, $1,600 for that.
That normally costs like $200. Oh, now it's $4,500.
Yeah, it was like shopping with the government. There's a $4,500 toilet seat.
It was like the old school Wheel of Fortune where the head would float around naming all the prices. If you know what that is, then you're old. Anyways, so like the TC does what one of my favorite things in the transaction, which is to stick to the deadlines. You got to stick to
milestones.
It's in the contract. Like, you got to stick to these milestones, and they're there for a reason, to keep things moving forward.
Good God, we don't even have enough time on this episode to talk about the other buyer that we had going at the same time.
Oh, God. No, not at all. No, we're not doing that.
It just occurred to me. I kind of thought I blocked him out
we're sticking with this transaction.
Okay,
right
so
here.
after asking for a $7,500 credit, we looked over the
report.
Yeah, and this is, like I said, this is when the emotion. This is when if a broker or agent has any kind of emotion, this is when it comes out. Because what Joey and I have always tried to do is put ourselves on the side of the buyer if we're on the seller side, and likewise if we're on the buyer side, we think of what's. And they came at us with such an unreasonable request. So when our seller was like, "Well, okay, we'll give them $1,600 for the old
electric
panel," which, according to even the inspection report,
it was Encino.
It had been recalled, so Dan didn't want anybody unhappy. So our seller decided, okay, here's $1,600, and then immediately the buyer's agent referred to it as a slap in the face.
I think his client said, and he reiterated it to us. Right?
Oh, it wasn't his comment?
I don't think so. I think his client felt like it, but I mean, who knows?
Okay,
it could have been attacked.
So this is where
could have been attacked.
This is where growing up with a psychologist makes me a little bit annoyed, because this is where I get to look into people's psychology. Let me make sure I understand the lack of mindfulness. This is for Meredith.
Right, thanks.
Yeah. So the $9,000 off the already low asking price. And
should have set an expectation.
There wasn't a lot of room to breathe after the $9,000, but then they got another $1,600, so they got a $10,600 gift in a way of looking at it, and seller was paying for the home warranty.
And the commission.
Oh, and the commissions, right, which because the sale had run so long, we actually negotiated down the buyer's commission, the buyer's side commission, from 2.5% to 2%, which maybe that's why he needed to be the transaction coordinator.
I would think so.
It just struck us funny that he was asking us for another $1,400 on top of everything else. Can't your guy just go another $1,400? And the cultural part felt to me, he just wants a little bit more. And it really, what upset me, and I don't normally get upset, but Joey saw it. Don't act like you're surprised. It really felt like a slap in the face the other way. And I think you and I both felt like they weren't, at least the buyer's agent wasn't giving it equal time. We found an inside guy that we're both close to at the buyer's agent at his brokerage. And I do believe he was instrumental in
Right. It did feel weird, like using a third party, which we didn't reach out. Like, he actually reached out to us.
Yeah, he said, "Oh, I'm watching this with interest."
Yeah.
Yeah. For a number of reasons. But
I think it definitely helped, and I'm appreciative of that. But like I said, I never wanted to get anybody in trouble or to like point fingers or anything like that. I just wanted to get this done. Like, we were just so over it at this point. Like, we just wanted to get to the finish line.
We really, really needed it for our own psyche. You
right.
know? And it wasn't like, and I've described it to you, Walter Payton was one of my heroes, one of the greatest football players of all time, and you never ever saw Walter Payton spike the ball when he scored, ever. He just kind of casually handed it over to the ref. Here you go, bud. And people asked him, why don't you ever celebrate? And he said, it doesn't feel like a celebration, it feels like relief. So, relief.
Done. I mean, And we close the deal. So I guess that's the most important thing to take away from this. But honestly, you got to have a transaction coordinator. They keep moving things forward, and it takes so much off of your plate that it's worth the couple hundreds of dollars that it is that they make.
It's not negotiable as far as we're concerned. There's too many mistakes that can be made, and you don't have time to make mistakes in a short escrow or even a longer escrow.
And you can see how it affected both sides by not having one transaction coordinator.
It was really there will be words at some point, but not today.
So what's the takeaway from all this? First of all, say no to 5460 White Oak Avenue. Any unit in there you should probably say no to. Say yes to a transaction coordinator, aka a TC, because they will make your life much, much, much more pleasant in all difficult transactions.
I found out that they really are brokerage specific. You and I have an all-time fave from our previous firm, but
totally.
But our TC nailed it.
It's great.
She really did great.
If you have any questions for me and Scott, or if you're looking to sell a condo that isn't at 5460 White Oak Avenue, you can reach out to us. We'll put our information in the show notes below. Hey, you can stream this podcast, Bitter Realtor, wherever you stream podcasts. Google, Apple, Spotify,
Stitcher.
Stitcher?
Stitcher.
Where else? I don't know.
We are not AI. We're not AI.
You tell me. If you guys found this episode interesting or if you found it boring, let us know. Write us a review. We want to hear about it, if it's good or bad. You can contact us too. I don't even know what else to say anymore other than this is the Bitter Realtor Podcast. For Scott Goldman, I'm Joey Rockenstein. Why am I bitter? Because I'm a realtor.